The lake had no reason to be there. It didn't belong to the mountains the way the pines did, or the fog, or the way the wind learned to sing in the switchbacks. It was a bowl of black water poured into a valley and told to stay. In summer, it looked tame. Families dragged coolers to the stony shore. Teenagers shoved each other off the dock. Fishermen stood patient on aluminum boats. But when night came, the lake remembered what it covered. Beneath the surface lay the old town of Clearvale. 2 streets, a schoolhouse, a church with a simple white steeple, a grocery where the owner knew everyone's names. When the dam went up in the 1960s, the town went down, its people forced to move uphill. The government took photographs for the archive. Men in caps carrying boxes, women tugging children's sleeves, the sheriff locking the school doors for the last time. The papers on some nights when the fog came low and thick. The new town swore it could still hear the school bell ringing, slow and patient, as if class would start once the water drained. Fishermen told each other that their lines snagged buttons, toys, the small bones of the past. Teenagers dared each other to swim past midnight. If you go under and open your eyes, the dare went, they'll open theirs too. Ethan called it content. 2 million views if we catch the bell, he said, grinning at his phone camera, as if the lake were already good for the algorithm. 3 if we catch a ghost. Maya hated when he joked like that, but she was here anyway, a wool hat pulled down over dark curls, eyes watching the shore the way you watch a stranger's hands. Lucas did what he always did, laughed too loudly, carried too much, pretended bravery until it felt real. Julia, who didn't pretend anything, had brought a thermos of cocoa and the calm that made other people feel like they'd already survived. They set up camp where the stones sloped into water. The dam wall loomed down lake like a concrete horizon. Fog gathered by degrees, not so much falling as climbing out of the water and pulling itself up onto the shore. The sun slid behind the ridge, and the color left the day without ceremony. When Ethan raised his camera for the intro, "What's up, guys? We're at Clearvale Lake, former drowning capital of..." Maya reached up and gently pushed the lens toward the water. They all did. The night made a sound that wasn't quite silence. Frogs, the far hiss of the dam's spillway, the little tapping of pebbles as the water rolled and let them go. And then, far out where the fog lay thickest, a tone lifted. It was Finn and bell-like, not loud, steady as a heartbeat. 1. Pause. 2. Pause. 3. Julia set the thermos down. "That's a buoy?" she offered, softly, like a question with manners. Ethan smiled with half his mouth and swung the mic to catch it. "Buoys don't ring in threes." The tone faded like a memory. The fog thickened as if it had heard its cue. Maya wrapped her arms around herself and watched the water breathe. The lake exhaled a little cold onto their ankles. Somewhere down in the dark, the town waited with its doors unlocked. "Okay," Ethan said. The grin returned. The lake, which had been offered a promise, made one of its own. Firelight is a liar. It made their circle look smaller and the trees nearer. But it didn't warm the lake. The water refused to take color. The flame's reflection lay on the surface like a coin you could never pick up. Lucas built the fire and fed it the way he fed every task, bigger than necessary, until it felt like he'd done enough. Sparks climbed, changed their minds, fell. Ethan filmed everything. Rule number 1 for midnight challenges. He said to an audience that would arrive later, never turn off the camera. Rule number 2, say this out loud, so if something happens, you can sue me. Don't do this without a sober friend. For us, that's Maya. Wow, Maya said, deadpan, safety embodied. Julia smiled without showing teeth. I'll be the cocoa, she said, and poured for all of them. Steam made little ghosts of their cups. They killed the lanterns to let the dark settle properly. The line where shore ended and lake began blurred to a suggestion. Beyond the first 10 feet, the water became a sheet of absence, featureless as an unblinking eye. The stars didn't show. Clouds lay heavy, like a hand. "Tell it," Lucas said, chucking a twig into the fire. "Tell us the story again." Ethan loved telling stories. His voice lifted automatically. "All right, they built the dam in 61, told everyone it was progress, clean energy, jobs. They offered buyouts and deadlines. Most left. Some didn't. They say the school teacher wouldn't move her class until the last day. They say she stayed too long. The water outran the trucks. When the sheriff came back for them, Maya lowered her cup. That's not the version my grandma told. She said no one came back for them, Maya said softly. They waited. They rang the bell until the sound was wrong. And when the bell stopped, the town did too. People up here don't argue about it. We just don't fish near the old street. Lucas glanced at the black water and forced a grin he didn't feel. Cool, 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 he said, which is what you say when your marrow gets colder and you don't want to admit it. Midnight soon, Julia said. Maybe we hear nothing and go home with boring footage and hot dogs. Maybe, Ethan said, which is what you say when part of you hopes for anything but nothing. He set a wireless mic on a rock near the shoreline and checked the levels on his recorder. The waveforms pulsed softly. Fire hiss, wind whisper, the occasional lake kiss of a ripple on stone. Maya took her own phone and opened a voice memo app, the timer a small brave number on the screen. She angled it toward the water. Clearvale Lake, midnight, she said. If anyone's there, don't. She stopped, cleared her throat. We're just listening. Try saying, we're not here to take anyone, Julia said. Like someone throwing a little bread to the dark. Maya did. The word anyone landed on the water and didn't float. Lucas got up with his flashlight. "Okay, I'm going down to the dock. If the bell rings, I want a shot without you goblins breathing in the mic." Ethan didn't look up from the recorder. "Don't be dumb." Lucas laughed. "I have a degree in dumb." He swung the light toward the little municipal dock. 6 planks with a cleat and a sign gold-faded to "Don't Run." The beam traveled clean over the boards and stopped when it should. But the end of the dock seemed farther than it had in daylight, like the lake had lent it distance. He started out anyway, boots thumping softly. "Don't fall in," Julia called, and the lake took her words and held them without echo. Maya kept her eyes on Lucas's back until he became the edge of the light, and then the suggestion of a person. He stopped at the end and swept his beam across the water. Fog drank it in 6 feet out. He stood with his free hand in his pocket, an outline of boy brave enough to stay and scared enough to stay anyway. "How are levels?" Ethan asked quietly. "Half to Maya, half to the machine." "Hungry," Maya said, a word that felt weird as soon as it left her mouth. "I mean, the first ripple came then, but not the way wind makes ripples. This began at a point out past the dock and rolled toward them in a neat ring, like a pebble had been dropped. Another followed it, and another, each circle fatter than the last, reaching for shore." Lucas leaned forward to see the source. There wasn't one. "Guys," he called, casual breaking at the edges, not loud, not near, but true. One clear tone threading fog. Then another. Then a third, each the same distance apart, each followed by a space, just long enough to feel like waiting. Ethan aimed the mic without breathing. The waveform on his screen climbed and fell like a tide obeying a rule. Lucas laughed, and the laugh was fear trying to get its seatbelt off. "No way," he said, and in the same motion, he crouched to shove his flashlight beam into the water beside the dock. The light filled the first 2 feet and found nothing. 3 feet down, something bright winked back, tiny, moving in a line, like a string of little lanterns drifting under the surface where the street might have been. "Do you—" Lucas began, and the water touched him. It was small, just the Lucas angled the light again, finding the little moving points of glow. They were clustered now, rising slow like bubbles that had learned to walk. The surface bulged a fraction, a dome no bigger than a bowl, then smoothed. Lucas took 1 step backward, and the dock groaned the way wood groans when it remembers it's a tree. "Lucas," Julia said, voice thin, "please." He turned to come back. The bell rang again. 1, 2, 3. And this time the last tone didn't fade, so much as slide into another sound. The high, soft braid of children laughing. Maya's phone recorded everything. On playback later, the laugh would be too crisp for distance, too layered for a few throats. 10, 20, more weaving in and out of one another, as if they'd learned harmonies from the lake. In the moment, it arrived like a draft under the tent of the night. Lucas took his second step toward shore, and the water reached again. Not a tug this time, a grip. Small, sure fingers found his ankle over the fabric of his pants, and for a ridiculous heartbeat, he thought of kids on field trips holding a rope so they wouldn't get lost. Ethan. His voice had a color he didn't recognize. Ethan, he didn't finish. He didn't fall. He simply wasn't on the dock anymore. There was no splash. One frame he was there, shoulders hunched, light crooked in his wrist, and the next he was part of the dark, as if someone had cut the outline of boy out of the air and laid the lake behind it. The flashlight clattered once against the boards and, choosing a side, rolled into the water. Its beam kept going down, making a white tunnel that showed nothing except the fact of down. Julia made a sound like her name breaking. Maya ran, the stupid animal run that says if you arrive quickly enough, the physics will reconsider, and skidded at the end of the dock on her knees, hands grabbing for the place where Lucas had been. Her fingers found wet wood, and a cold so sudden it stung, and she jerked back with a cry. "Lucas!" Ethan shouted, the way you shout at someone who's just around a corner, if they'd only answer. "Lucas, answer me!" The lake answered. The laughter braided itself tighter. Under it, a dozen soft voices shaped a word that might have been Ethan's name, and might have been the sound of water learning language. Maya, breathing hard, leaned out over the edge and did the one thing she had promised herself she wouldn't. She opened her eyes wide and looked into the water. At first, there was only the flashlight's column. White bled to green, particles like snow. Then, as if a curtain gave up pretending to be a wall, a face lifted. It was Lucas's, pale with the cold, hair floating like lake grass. His eyes were open and calm, as if listening in church. He raised one hand and pressed it against the underside of the surface. It made no ripple, no distortion, like the skin of the world had grown a second skin. "Lucas," Maya whispered, and the second skin cooled her breath. Lucas's mouth opened. Bubbles didn't come out. Something like words did, a trail of little silver circles that rose and broke and still said nothing. More faces gathered behind his. Small ones, hair slicked to foreheads, mouths shaped like O's for songs. They were shoulder to shoulder, holding hands the way students do when someone tells them to cross a street. Some smiled with their teeth, some did not. Julia's fingers found Maya's sleeve and gripped until the fabric hurt. "Don't," she said, voice the size of a pin. "Don't touch." Ethan dropped to his stomach, camera forgotten on the dock beside him, and flattened his palm against the place where Lucas's hand rested. He expected cold. He got pressure, the soft pushback of child's hands in a game where you lean until someone loses. "Lucas, push," he said, useless, furious, bargaining. "Push, man, I've got you." The bell rang once, right beneath them. The sound came up through their bones. Lucas's head turned slightly, the way you turn toward a teacher's voice. His face, so close Ethan could count the pale freckles the sun had failed to steal. Changed. Not expression, intention. Something in him softened, as if the lake had told him a story about tiredness and how sweet it would be to stop. The laughter thinned. The little lights below drifted, reordering. Lucas's hand slid away from Ethan's. Not fast, just inevitable. And within 3 breaths, he was one more shape among many. And then not even that. Silence returned, as if the lake had closed a door. For a long breath, none of them did anything. The absurdity of the dock, the ordinary nailheads, the city warning sign with its cheerful clip art swimmer, all remained their treacherous selves. Ethan moved first. He sat up, as if a string had been cut between his ribs and spine. He reached for the camera and held it like a talisman, pointing it at nothing until the red light and the rectangle in his hands made the world feel slightly less lawless. "Okay," he said, not to the girls, not to the lake, but to the part of himself that measured chaos. "We're not leaving. We're not. We figure it out. People fall in, and we pull them out. That's a thing that happens. It's a thing that—" "Ethan," Julia said. And when he looked at her, she was crying and hadn't noticed. That wasn't falling. Maya stood slowly. Her knees had 2 crescents of damp where they had kissed the dockboards. She kept her voice level because someone had to. "We go back to shore. We build the fire higher. We listen. We don't split. And we don't say anyone's name out loud again." Ethan opened his mouth to argue and closed it. He nodded once. Small, Julia picked up the fallen thermos with hands that shook and hugged it to her chest, as if it were Lucas. They walked back up the dock, every plank now a story they would have to carry. Behind them, the water made a small sound, like a child deciding not to cry. At the ring of stones, Maya added wood the way you add reasons to stay alive. Hurried, focused, a little ruthless. Flames took. The lake stayed dark. "Midnight," Ethan said hoarsely, glancing at his dead phone as if it owed him a time. "The bell. It'll ring again. It will." He pointed the camera at the water, and lower, at the edge where the rocks met the black. "If it shows us where he is, we go in." "No," Maya said. "We don't go in. We make it come to us." "How?" Julia asked, wiping her face with the heel of her hand, sounding like someone halfway between here and stopped. Maya looked at the lake, which looked back without eyes. She remembered a story her grandmother had not quite told, about offerings the mountain people made before there was money. "You don't pay hunger with meat," her grandmother had said. "You pay it with attention or with songs." She picked up her recorder and pressed the little red circle. Her voice shook, and she let it. "My name is Maya," she said, "to the black water. But you don't need it. We know you stayed. We know you're not alone." The lake did not answer, but the air thinned as if a crowd had leaned closer. "I'm going to read to you," Maya said, and reached for the one book she had in her pack, an old paperback of poems she kept for camping because the pages forgave dirt. She opened to the first thing her fingers found and began, words fragile and defiant and very alive. The first line left her mouth and moved out over the water like a bridge that didn't know what it was for yet. Somewhere in the fog, something made the softest sound, like a bell agreeing. Ethan lowered the camera, without meaning to, and listened. Julia stopped crying and rested her head on her knees like a child at story time. Out on the lake, a new ripple formed. Not a circle, but a path, as if small feet were stepping carefully toward shore. The ripple reached the shore, then faded as if it had never been. The lake was still again, black and flat, but the air around the three of them buzzed with the memory of sound. Maya's voice trailed off. The poem hung unfinished. She lowered the book, staring at the water. It listened. Julia whispered, "How do you know?" Because the lake answered. The recorder in Maya's hand, still running, caught something beneath the hiss of wind and crackle of fire. A faint, playful noise, the laughter of children, high and airy. She replayed it, and the three of them leaned close. The laugh twisted. The voices whispered their names, one after another. Ethan, Julia, Maya. Ethan's camera shook as his hands tightened around it. That's just feedback. But the laughter rose again, not from the recorder this time, from the lake itself. It spread across the surface like wind, but there was no breeze. Julia clapped her hands over her ears. "Stop it! Please! Stop!" The sound cut off. The silence that followed was worse. Then Lucas's flashlight beam flickered on beneath the water. He'd wavered, turning in lazy arcs, though no one held it. For a moment, it illuminated something pale drifting just under the surface, too small to be Lucas. A hand, tiny, reaching upward. "Ethan," Maya's voice cracked. "They're children." Ethan forced a laugh that died in his throat. No, that's just plants or fish." Julia stood, shaking her head. "Plants don't laugh." She pointed at the shoreline, where the mud sucked at her boots. Half buried in the muck lay a rusted tricycle, its handlebars bent, its wheels frozen with age. A child's shoe lay beside it, soaked through, the leather peeling. The lake sighed, rippling once as though amused. And somewhere, faint and far, the bell rang again. Fog pressed tighter around the lake, until even the fire seemed to struggle, its light trapped inside the circle of stones. The water glowed faintly, not from the moon, but from somewhere beneath. Ethan lifted the camera, whispering into the mic. "We're seeing movement under the surface. I don't know if this is real or staged, but—" "Shut up," Maya hissed. "Just look." The fog parted for a moment, as if a curtain had been drawn back. Out in the middle of the lake, shapes rose from the water. Roofs, angled, broken rooftops, too steep for rafts, too wrong for debris. A steeple pushed through the mist, its cross bent sideways like a broken finger. "The town," Julia whispered. "It's still here." The water rippled again, this time carrying sound. A single chime of a bell drifted across the surface, thin, hollow, echoing from the steeple itself. Maya clutched the recorder. Ethan, trembling, zoomed in with his camera. His breath hitched. Oh my God. Shapes stood in the water. Dozens of them. Small figures, shoulder deep, unmoving. Their heads tilted slightly, as though listening. They were children. One raised an arm and waved. Julia stumbled back. No, they're not alive. They can't be alive. The laughter returned, rolling across the lake in playful bursts. It wasn't cruel, not at first. It was the kind of laugh you'd hear in a playground. Uncomfortable, warm, and careless. But the longer it went on, the less human it sounded. It stretched, distorted, layered with echoes. And then from the fog, a darker shadow moved. Taller, thinner, a woman's silhouette. Her dress rippled in the water, her hair floating like weeds. Her hand rested gently on the head of one of the figure, turned toward shore. Though her face was hidden by fog, the weight of her gaze pressed against them. Slowly, she raised her hand and pointed, not at Ethan, not at Julia, at Maya. The laughter stopped. The bell rang once more, and all the children turned their heads in unison. Julia couldn't stand the silence after the bell. Her chest heaved as if the lake itself had stolen her breath. "We have to leave," she said, voice trembling. "Right now. Pack up. Run." Ethan shook his head, camera still fixed on the water. "Do you understand what this is? Proof. Actual proof. We can't just—" "Proof of what?" Maya snapped. "That we're next?" Before either of them could stop her, Julia stepped closer to the shore. Her shoes sank into the mud as she squinted at the water, at the faces that lingered just beneath the fog. "They're children," she whispered. "They need help." "Julia, don't." Maya reached out, but Julia was already moving. One step, then another, the lake lapping at her ankles. "Come back!" The figures in the water didn't move. They only stared. Julia's reflection wavered on the surface, fractured by ripples. She leaned closer, trying to see. For a moment, her own face looked back. Then it changed. Her reflection smiled, wide, too wide, its eyes dark and hollow. Julia gasped. Before she could retreat, the water surged upward with unnatural speed. Pale hands broke the surface, dozens of them, small and desperate. They grabbed her wrists, her arms, her waist, pulling with strength no child should have. She screamed, thrashing, but the lake swallowed the sound. Ethan lunged forward, dropping the camera, grabbing her by the shoulders. "I've got you! Julia, hold on!" Maya wrapped her arms around Ethan's waist, bracing, but it was like pulling against a riptide. The hands were endless, grasping, dragging Julia down inch by inch. Her eyes met theirs, wide with terror. "Don't let me go!" Then, just as suddenly, the water went still. Julia was gone. Only her thermos floated to the surface, spinning slowly before tipping under. Ethan collapsed onto the rocks, gasping, his hands dripping lake water. No. Maya's recorder, still running, caught something beneath the silence. Julia's voice, soft, distorted. "It's okay. I'm with them now." Ethan's eyes snapped to the water. The children were still there, smiling faintly. And in their circle, holding hands with them, stood Julia, floated around her head. Her lips moving in unison with theirs. The bell rang again, this time closer. The fire burned low, though no one had stopped feeding it. The air itself seemed to steal the flame's strength. Ethan sat hunched over his camera, staring at Julia's last recording frame. The moment her face disappeared under pale hands, Maya clutched the recorder so tightly, her knuckles went white. Then Lucas's flashlight blinked once beneath the surface, as if signaling. The glow drifted closer to shore, and with it came something else. A book. It broke the surface, gently, carried on a ripple, and bumped against the rocks at Maya's feet. She reached down with shaking hands and pulled it free. The cover was warped, the leather cracked and blackened with water. The pages clung together, but she peeled them apart. A diary. The handwriting inside was frantic, blurred in places, but legible. The first page she opened read, "The water is rising faster than they promised. The children are afraid." Another page, darker with ink. "They come to me in dreams now, their faces pale, their voices bright as bells. They tell me they are not alone. They tell me they will never be alone again." Maya's throat tightened as she turned to the final entry. "The lake demands company. Every generation, more voices to sing beneath. One must always stay, or it will come for all." Ethan snatched the diary from her hands, scanning the words. His face was pale, but his eyes gleamed with desperate calculation. "It's saying we can bargain. One of us for Julia. One of us, and she's free." "That's not what it says," Maya snapped. "It says someone always stays. That doesn't mean we get to choose." But Ethan was already pacing, the camera dangling uselessly at his side. "If it's her or us, if it's one life for three, then maybe—" "Don't you dare finish that," Maya hissed. "We are not trading people like coins." The water ripped, and then they heard Julia's voice again, carried from the lake. "It's okay. One of you will come. One of you will stay." The children's laughter swelled, sweet and sharp as glass. Ethan stared at the black water, jaw trembling. "If it means surviving." Maya's voice cracked like a whip. "No, that's exactly how it feeds." The bell tolled again, louder this time. 1, 2, 3, and in the fog, pale faces lifted, watching, waiting. The fog thickened until the campfire was only a faint orange blur. Every crackle of wood sounded far away, muffled by water-soaked air. Maya and Ethan stood at the shoreline, the diary between them, its ink bleeding as if the words themselves wanted to sink. The lake stirred. Ripples spread outward, not from one point, but from everywhere at once. as though the entire surface breathed. Pale shapes gathered just beneath, dozens of small hands pressing against the underside like frost on glass. In their circle, Julia smiled with lips that no longer belonged to her. The teacher's shadow rose behind them, tall and patient. Her voice, when it came, was not a whisper, but a current threading through bone. One must stay. Ethan's breathing grew ragged. He stepped forward, half to the water, half away from Maya. If it's me, let her go. Take me, just let her. The children laughed. Maya grabbed his arm. No, don't give it what it wants. Don't you see? It doesn't trade, it takes. The bell tolled again, louder now, shaking the air, the ground, their ribs. Ethan staggered, clutching his head. I can hear them. The water surged. Hands burst through the surface, dozens of them, grabbing, clutching. Ethan screamed as they pulled him down. Maya lunged, catching his wrist. But the grip was endless. Small fingers, cold and relentless, dragging him inch by inch into the black. Ethan! She cried, her voice tearing. For a heartbeat, his face broke the surface, pale and wide-eyed. Run! He gasped. Then the water swallowed him whole. No splash, just silence. The ripples smoothed. And then Maya saw him, standing among the children now, eyes blank, smiling. His lips moved with theirs. The teacher raised her hand again, pointing straight at Maya. Her knees buckled. She stumbled back toward the campfire, the recorder still clutched tight. Its red light blinked weakly. She pressed it to her lips and whispered, voice breaking, I won't stay. The children's laughter rose until it filled the mountains. The fog folded over itself, wrapping the shore like a shroud. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The fire burned normally. The lake lay still. The night was silent. Maya stood alone. She turned and walked away, leaving her pack, her tent, everything. By dawn, she staggered into town, clothes dripping wet, though she swore she had never stepped into the water. Her eyes were hollow, and when she spoke, her voice carried a faint echo, as if dozens of children were whispering underneath her words. At Clearvale Lake, the water is calm again. Tourists fish. Children skip stones. The dam stands proud, a monument to progress. But if you linger after dark, if you wait until the fog thickens, you might hear the bell. 3 slow tolls, followed by laughter just beneath the surface. And if you lean too close to the water's edge, you may see small hands pressing upward, waiting for yours.